Welcome back to the At the Helm podcast, where we steer through everything from sports to superheroes. I'm your host, Blake Helms. And while it may be April at the moment, I am going to be discussing March Madness. This year was a crazy tournament. A lot of games came down to the wire. Some dominations, some nail biters, some upsets. You know, your traditional March Madness. In this year's, I'll be going through the men's tournament exclusively. I'm more well versed in that tournament, and I really enjoy that one specifically. And yeah, let's just start off with naming. It was also March. Let's talk about the conference winners real quick. You had Purdue upsetting Michigan in the championship up to win the Big Ten. You had Arizona doing what they were expected to do, win the Big 12, even though Iowa State gave them a run for their money. Duke, just ACC champs, not surprisingly. St. John's beat UConn to win the Big East, which, did not deter UConn's national championship aspirations, as we'll discuss later. And then Arkansas ended up winning the SEC rather than, say, Florida or Alabama this year. So props to them. But yeah, that's the major tournament winners going into it, which they were all going to get in regardless. They were, locked in the tournament before that. But hey, it's a great accolade. It's a great banner to hang up winning your conference tournament. And I understand, for me, I'm kind of partial to the conference, the tournament championship than the in-season. They're both great, doing both. You got teams like Duke and Arizona that did both this year. But, I think, winning a tournament just kind of, it seems like, more rewarding and proving to me. But, it's also, the in-tournament championships also reward for, all the hard work you did get going up to the tournaments. Because I do understand, because tournaments, anyone can get hot at the right time. Granted, usually the best team does win, but sometimes they don't. Speaking of which, let's get into the first round of the national tournament, starting with what would have been arguably the greatest upset of all time when Siena made Duke sweat. Siena was leading 43-32 at halftime. Clearly, Duke didn't take them seriously. They didn't prepare, and they almost paid for it. But their defense, locked up in the second half. They were able to contain them, continue, and get their scoring going. But practice was foreshadowing for what would happen later in the tournament. Or maybe it was just a one-off thing where Duke just underestimated their competition, which you just can't do on the big stage of the national tournament. But Duke was able to pull through, get out with a win, advance, and not become the third one seed in history to lose in the first round. Speaking of which, I had Virginia picked to win this tournament the year that they did, were the first team to ever do that. So, yay, yeah, that sucked. Then going into Duke's counterpart, their arch rival, their neighbor, University of North Carolina, blowing a 19-point lead to VCU to lose in the first round, 82-78 in overtime, where Terrence Hill Jr. of VCU made a layup to tie the game with 11 seconds left and a dagger three in overtime to secure the win for VCU. North Carolina had dealt with injuries. They had a disappointing ACC tournament run as well. But 19, you can't excuse that. 19-point, you were up 19. You can't win when you're up 19 at one point. I don't think it matters who's on the court. You can't, that's just unexcusable in the realm of basketball. And it's not the only 19-point lead a team from North Carolina blew in this tournament. Then going into probably the upset of the tournament, High Point, shocking Wisconsin, as Chase Johnson made his first 2-point basket of the season in a breakaway layup to give High Point the lead with 11.7 seconds left in the game. for High Point to win 83-82. And humble brag, I'd actually, because there's always like one or two 5 or 12 upsets in a tournament. In one of my brackets, I actually did pick High Point to beat Wisconsin. Big brain move right there. Let's not talk about the other upsets that I foresaw, because just about none of them came to fruition. I did some bad ones. I tried to go in Cinderella stories. Bad move. Just pick smart. Pick an upset or two here or there, but just, go with the smart choice. Then, in the definition of madness, Kentucky and Santa Clara, my opinion, game of the first round, probably not even that close. Kentucky tied the game with a little amount of time left. Santa Clara takes it up with court, and then Allen Graves hits a 3 to go up with 2.4 seconds. And then as he's celebrating, he's going down the court, he's pumped up, flapping his jersey, he's all excited. Kentucky is doing a quick inbound. Otega Owe shoots it, jacks it up from half court, bank and in to tie the game, send it to overtime, where Kentucky won 89-84 in, just a tremendous sequence that, that I thought about for a few days, that the internet praised for a few days. It was just tremendous how that game ended. It would have been cool for Santa Clara to win, have a team beat the SEC in the first round, from a mid-major, not a, power. I say in basketball, I can say power 5 in basketball. There's power 4 for all sports with the Big 12, ACC, Big 10, SEC. The Big East has a big basketball presence, so they're a conference that can sneak their way into the power discussion, at least in men's basketball. I don't know so much about women's or other sports, but, definitely not football. But then, this one hits a little close to home. It's not like a big madness thing. The game went as you would expect with or without this happening, but a major storyline in the tournament, at least for here names. Joshua Jefferson from Iowa State suffered a low ankle sprain just less than 3 minutes into the first round. And, this is a guy who was, first team all Big 12. He was an All-American player. He was probably the best player on the Iowa State team, on a team that had a few really good players on the national level that would rank pretty high in certain respects. But Jefferson, he was all around. He could shoot the 3. He could get down low, great mid-range, could pass, rebound. He's a great rebounding presence. He was the Swiss Army knife of the Iowa State basketball team this year. And that game went fine. They shot really well the rest of the game to beat Tennessee State, but that's just a bad thing to suffer. And there was hope. I was hoping. It was unlikely that he was going to come back for when Iowa State eventually got to the Sweet 16 after beating Kentucky pretty good in the second round. But he said after in the interviews, like he wasn't even close to coming back in the Sweet 16. He wasn't gonna make it back to the Elite 8 had Iowa State made it there. I saw a video. He's shooting around now. I don't know if he's like at 100% yet, but it's nice to see that he's recovering, and I hope that he is a senior. This was gonna be the end of his Iowa State career anyway, but it just sucks to see it end that way. And I'm going to go on a little bit of an Iowa State rant here for a little bit, but I think we're cursed, man. We're just cursed. Matt Campbell left this he's no longer our head football coach when, this last season hadn't been what we'd hoped for, but the season before had been the best in team in program history. And he done a great job of turning this program around into making it respectable. Being a ranked team pretty often in his tenure, making 2 conference championships. Unfortunately, never winning one, never crossing that barrier. Especially last year, when Arizona State was a much better team, like clearly in that game and in their performance in the playoffs. But we win that game. We're in the playoffs. Does it go well for us? Probably not. But it's still there. We're in the college football playoffs. That's a big thing for a program like this. Now he's gone. I hope Jimmy Rogers does well. I don't know if this next season is going to be great, but I hope that he's able to just build the foundation for his time as head coach of the football team. But then obviously with basketball this year, Joshua Jefferson gets hurt 3 minutes into the first round. Last year, Keyshawn Gilbert missed the tournament as a whole, and a lot of the Big 12 tournament also. That was bad. He was one of our better players last year. Him missing the tournament definitely changed things. And then obviously George Niang, and I don't remember. I'm not 100% sure what year that was. This is before I was even really paying attention that much to college basketball, let alone Iowa State specifically. But he was one of the best players in the country. Iowa State had a real chance of at least making it deep, going Final Four. He gets injured during the tournament, and basically ending it for Iowa State right there. So this isn't just like a one-time heartbreak thing for Iowa State. This is a thing that's happened multiple times in the last just decade, for a decade plus. Like I said, I don't know exactly when George Niang got injured, but 2010s. So that just really stinks. Oh, not to mention Audie Crooks just left. So there goes our entire women's team left. So I don't know how that's gonna go next year. You need NIL money to survive. All right, that's a rant for another day. But obviously not going well for Iowa State. If you don't care about Iowa State, sorry about this rant. If you do, please relate to me. Seriously, this just Anyway, in the first round, as expected, there's definitely, with the high seed teams, there's just gaps in talent that you just can't breach. That several teams scored over 100 points in the first round. You got Iowa State scored 108, Florida scored 114, Illinois scored 105, Purdue scored 104, Michigan scored 101, St. Louis scored 102. That was a 9 seed that did that. So maybe they were a little improperly seeded, or maybe Georgia just stunk. I don't know. But the rest of them are 1-2, Illinois 3 seed against the Ivy League Penn, which, great school, just not for basketball. But the first round, you had your upsets, but there's not as many as there were, say, 3 years ago. When UConn won their first of their back-to-back championships, that was a 4 seed versus a 5 seed in the championship. That was a weird, wild year. That, and, it was a few years ago. It was 2018 maybe, so a little while ago now. But Villanova's second championship win. Loyola Chicago was in the Final Four that year. That's insane. Cinderella stories, while not super frequent, they did happen. And even if it's not like Cinderella, just unlikely teams making it deep just is not doesn't really happen this year. This year we had 2 1s, a 2, and a 3. So a few upsets, in there, but not like groundbreaking. Last year it was all 4 1 seeds. UConn dominated the year before that. The way the NIL and transfer portal are set up right now, it kind of quote unquote kills the mid majors chance to go far in the tournament. You're still going to have your handful of upsets in the first round, but I don't know if anyone outside of the power conferences made it to the Sweet 16, made it past the second round. They were able to beat one, top of one, big upset, make it past that. But after that, not really. Even the upsetted teams were still teams from major conferences. So, they have more at their disposal, and, it's a bigger chance of something like that happening. But yeah, all right, yeah. Let's go into the second round where there were some crazy games between high-level teams, so, starting with St. John's making the Sweet 16 off of a buzzer beater layup from Dylan Darling to beat Kansas. FKU, baby. 67-65. Oh, where was Jordan Peterson at? Where was he? Number one pick in the draft? Nah. He's talented, but best ability is availability. And, you got to carry your teams in these moments. But, he's a great player. I'm just crapping on Kansas State. Not Kansas State, just Kansas. Crap on both of them. They're both rivals. But, yeah, Dylan Darling hadn't made a shot, I think, all game. He was 0 for 4 or something from 3 in the game, but he knew he wanted the ball to be in his hands at the moment. He knew he could deliver, and he did. Just, being able to topple Kansas, who was one of the greatest programs in the history of college basketball. They won the championship only 4 years ago now. They are a team that's consistently there. The only coach in the history of Kansas basketball that has a losing record is the guy who invented this game of basketball, which, crazy stat, but it is true. And yeah, St. John's, they were coming off a recent victory over UConn in the Big East Championship. Then they come and beat Kansas to make the Sweet 16 after last year's bitter disappointment as a 2 seed. This year they were a 5 seed, making a little bit of a better. They were having a better run this year than they did last year, despite being a really good team last year. Just didn't do well in the tournament. Then you have the probably the biggest shock of the tournament after the first round. You had Iowa beating the number 1 seed Florida after a clutch 3 by Alvar. Sorry if I mispronounce this. Oh, who would care? He plays for Iowa. Alvar Fogaraswich. Something like that. With 3.9 seconds to win 73-72, which Florida, I understand pressing in some instances, but you have the lead. Why are you pressing with only seconds remaining? What are you afraid of? Why do you act like you need a turnover there? It's not like you're down or even tied. Just let them take the ball up the court. They're gonna go pretty fast, but you made it so much. Made them go faster. You left them, and once you break a press, there's openings, there's chances, there are opportunities, and they capitalized on it. Credit to the Hawkeyes. They capitalized on that opportunity. But man, what are you doing? Florida, you are the reigning champs. You had won the whole damn thing last year. And I correctly predicted you winning the whole damn thing last year. But I'll admit, I kind of saw, not fraud, but I saw them as the 1 seed that wasn't going to make it as quite to, like, if there was a 1 seed that wasn't going to make the Final Four, it was going to be them, not just because they were the lowest ranking of the 4 of them. As far as I know, they were the number 4 team going into the tournament. But, their loss to Vanderbilt in the SEC SEC tournament kind of showed that they were, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable. They were vulnerable to be upset. But Iowa, of all teams, now I'm sure Iowa had a decent season and all. Like they weren't a horrible team by any stretch of the means. They made the Elite Eight, as we'll discuss later, somehow. But that's a big upset. Like it's inexcusable from the standpoint of Florida. It's a tremendous win for the University of Iowa, who I believe made their first Sweet 16 in like 30 years, and their first Elite Eight later afterwards in like 40 years, roughly, give or take a little bit. But it'd been a while since they'd gotten that far. So props to them. That's a good accomplishment for them. And how did Iowa be the team from this state to make it to the Elite Eight this year? Iowa, not Iowa State. Iowa State was the much better team. Iowa State beat Iowa in the Cyhawk game. They were the better team. They had better players. They had everything. Why? How? I hate Iowa. I hated Iowa before I went to Iowa State. I was an Illinois fan growing up. I'm from Illinois. So I double hate Iowa. I hate Iowa more than some Iowa State students. And because, ugh. Moving on, Nebraska versus Vanderbilt, arguably game of the tournament. I mean, they were just going back and forth, and my TV glitched the last few minutes. It was working. I missed the last couple minutes. I hate that I missed that. But regardless of my frustrations, great game, great ending. Nebraska's Braden Fragar made game-winning layup with 2.2 seconds, and then what would have been the shot of the tournament. Vanderbilt's Tyler Tanner throws it from half court, and then it just rims out. It was this close to going in. Yeah, that's literally the closest you're going to get without actually making the shot. And man, that would have been just an incredible moment. Because, yeah, Nebraska won 74-72. So they won by 2 points. They were tied going to that game-winning layup by Frager. So if that shot had gone in, it's not like with Kentucky's where it would have forced overtime. That would have won them the game. And that would have been an incredible moment, probably the greatest moment in Vanderbilt basketball history. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. Maybe they won a championship in like 1935 or something. But still, that would have been one of the greatest, if not the greatest moment in the history of the Vanderbilt basketball program. And would have been the greatest heartbreaker probably in Nebraska basketball history, who I don't think they made a tournament in so long. Like that, as far as now. And then another major upset, a team in Texas, a number 11 seed, who was one of the first, was in one of those 4 games to really qualify for the tournament. They were one of the first 4 teams. They go out in the second round, beat number 3 Gonzaga to advance to the Sweet 16, winning 74-68. Gonzaga, you are always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Not necessarily this tournament, but you are always a top team. You always rank very high. You always win your conference because you are pretty much the only high-level program in it. Respect to St. Mary's, but, not the same. But you are constantly a team that looks great, has a high seed, sometimes gets pretty far, but you never finish the job. This year, obviously, it's a little different. It's only the second round. But you got beat by a team that, despite their seed, was really one of the last teams in. Maybe they just give the 11 seed games to teams that are like of a higher profile. Like Texas is in terms of overall college sports, that's a really good school. Basketball this year, not so much comparatively. I'm saying that they made the Sweet 16, but going into the tournament. And then Gonzaga, of course, doing what they do, they lose. It's a sad fact, but it's a true fact. The couple times you get to the championship, you lose that. I don't know when the last time you actually did win the whole thing was, but yeah, you never cross the finish line, at least in my experience. Going on to the Sweet 16 now that instead of I'm just touching on the highlights of the rounds, I'm gonna at least mention each game from the following rounds because this is the most, and there's only 8. Duke defeated St. John's in a back and forth game, bunch of lead changes. Duke ended up winning 80-75 to move on to the Elite 8, as you would expect. St. John's was a great team. They won the Big East. They had a chance in this game. I didn't see it, but I'm assuming a few different things happened. Maybe they can get her done. But yeah, Duke was expected to. They're a 1 seed. Getting the Elite 8 for a 1 seed is probably the bare minimum. Then UConn surviving Michigan State. UConn was up 19 at one point. They blew it. Michigan State was winning for a little bit. UConn was able to finish the job, get the lead back, keep it, winning 67-63. But yeah, there is a I don't know what it is, but 19 constantly comes up in this tournament. North Carolina blew a 19-point lead. UConn survived blowing a 19-point lead. And we'll get to Duke's 19-point lead in just a little bit. Then, Iowa beat Nebraska 77-71. But the thing that sealed it, that was the thing that cost Nebraska before Iowa piled on the free throws or points at the very end. Nebraska, on an Iowa inbound from the far baseline, only had 4 people on the court. The mortal sin of sports, not having enough players on the court, which just led to a and one dunk for Iowa. Like, what is it with Iowa this tournament and their opponents being small brain on inbounds, especially late in the game? I mean, Florida made a dumb decision. Like, that was a decision, though, when they did their full court press when they were in the lead. Nebraska did a full court press, understandably. I believe they were down, or at least it was a really close game at the time. Pressure makes sense then, and there were still a few minutes left. But only having 4 people, that's egregious mistake. You can't do that. I said about other inexcusable things like blowing leads. This is by far the most inexcusable thing you can do in this situation, other than like punch the other team. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know what their timeout situation was, but if I'm the coach, I notice you gotta just count. You gotta make sure. If you have one, he should have used it. Maybe he didn't have one. I could be overlooking that, but still, what the hell? Also, you're doing this against Iowa. This is a rival team. This is the corn rival, whatever the rivalry is, but corn related, because Nebraska and Iowa are basically the same state, just covered in corn. But this is an arch rival, a conference rival, a team that you have your rivalry weekend football game with, and you do this in the national tournament for a spot in the Elite 8 between 2 teams that basketball programs are not historically great, at least in the last few decades. Like, what are you doing? My gosh. Then, it's 3 versus 2 seed, but still, Illinois smothered Houston to win 65-55, only up 24-22 at the half. Defense is what this game was. Very low scoring, some poor offense by especially Houston in the second half. They couldn't shoot worth a damn. And I mentioned this in my previous video. Check it out, where I discussed Big 12 teams going into March Madness. Houston's offense was not very good this year. Houston had one of the worst offenses in the Big 12 with like they were ranked like 12th or 13th in most offensive statistical categories. Their defense was really good. That's why they were so good. That's why they were a 2 seed. Their defense was outstanding. But clearly, Illinois' defense is pretty good too. And their offense has Wagler, who's going to be a top 10 pick in the draft more than likely as a freshman. Really great player. But Houston could not stop the European Union that the Illinois team consisted of. Seriously, so many players on that team from Europe that Illinois might be able to just churn out European talent for a while now they've got that system established. And other teams are probably going to start following suit. Not much to say in this game. A battle of two conference champions. Big 12 champion Arizona, SEC champion Arkansas. Big 12 domination over the SEC champion, 109-288. Just Arizona wiping the floor, blazing their path to the Elite Eight. Number 2 Purdue versus number 11 Texas Tech. Purdue survived to get to the Elite Eight after a Trey Kaufman-Renn makes a tip-in with 0.7 seconds left to take the lead, winning 79-77. I just hit the mic. Oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I'm excited. This Braden Smith, the all-time leader in assists in college history. He went up for the layup, was off. Kaufman-Renn tips it in. It goes down along with Texas. Hard-fought team. Great performance in the tournament. All respect in the world to the University of Texas in this tournament, despite you being SEC Big 12 backstabbing scum. Back page. It was a tight game early. I believe Bama had the lead at the half, but a dominant second half lifted Michigan over Alabama 92-77 to put the eventual champion. I guess spoilers if you didn't know that, but why are you watching this video if you didn't? Lifts Michigan into the Elite Eight to their eventual championship victory. And then Tennessee takes advantage of a massive size difference down low, the best offensive rebounding team in the country. Takes the size difference with Joshua Jefferson's injury over Iowa State to win 76-62. And again, that was really close early. Iowa State was able to score when they could. They forced a lot of turnovers that gave them fast break points that kept them in it, but they just couldn't rebound worth a crap. Tennessee had more offensive rebounds than Iowa State had rebounds total, which obviously when one of your best players, who is also one of your biggest players in Joshua Jefferson, is hurt, that has a major impact on that. And we got to give Tennessee credit. They didn't give Milan Momcilovic, the best shooter in the country, an inch to work with. They shut him down entirely, which in this situation, Iowa State could not afford. He was a person that needed to have a big game in order for Iowa State to have a chance. But Tennessee played well. They move on to the Elite Eight. In the Elite Eight, let's just start with the obvious headliner. UConn, miraculous 19-point comeback to eliminate the number 1 overall seed in the tournament, Duke. 73-72 off of both biggest mistake, biggest error, most egregious lapse you can make in this situation, and a tremendous shot to seal the deal. Caden Boozer commits the costly turnover in the final seconds where he saw a man down the court behind UConn's press, wide open. If he gets the ball to him, the game is over. But he's got 2 UConn players above him. He tries to go over. There is no path over those players. He turns it over. Braylon Mullins gets the ball from the logo, shoots it, perfect. It goes in, winning UConn the game. But it almost went from the highest high to the lowest of lows if the referees called it properly. The players did nothing wrong. The players did great. It was a clean play. But Dan Hurley's massive ego almost cost him everything. After that shot, after the initial celebration, Hurley, big tough guy, goes up, basically headbutts the ref to look at him like to mog him or whatever. He just show him up, I guess. That was the stupidest thing you could have possibly done. If the referee had actually called that properly, that would have been automatic technical, 2 free throws for Duke when they're only down 1. They put their best shooter out. Granted, stuff happens. He could have missed 1, maybe even both. But chances are he makes both free throws and Duke wins anyway. Now, I'm not a massive Duke fan. They win a lot. They can go a little while without winning championship. But they did kind of they screwed themselves, first of all. You gave up that 19-point lead. No excuses. Horrible turnover. You just hang on to the ball there. You're going to get fouled. I think they didn't even need to cross half court because they think they had the 10 seconds to work with. But just hold the ball. Just take the foul. Go shoot free throws. And you're going to win the game. I mean, just don't be stupid. Not really much more you can say about it. Just don't be stupid. And then, in a state rivalry, Iowa versus Illinois. Illinois controlled the majority of the game. They won 71-59 to reach the first Final Four in 20 years. Illinois had the better offense, they had the better defense, they had the best player, so they won the game. Arizona dominated the second half. Purdue was winning at halftime, but second half by Arizona pushed them ahead to the Final Four to beat Purdue 79-64. Michigan just absolutely decimated Tennessee 95-62. Not much else to say. They crushed them. Had Iowa State, even with Joshua Jefferson, makes me think Iowa State probably wouldn't have won that game to make it the Final Four. But great. You can count. That was probably when Michigan started being the heavy favorite. That and when Duke got eliminated. Final Four, Indianapolis, the big time. UConn took advantage of a big shooting slump by Illinois, which also happened to Michigan in the championship. UConn Illinois couldn't shoot very well. They had difficulty scoring. UConn didn't as much, so they ended up winning 71-62 to reach their third championship final in 4 years, where they win. They go on to create a true dynasty, which doesn't happen very often anymore. Teams don't usually. You have your back-to-backs that happen every once in a while. Although before UConn, there hadn't been one in a fair amount of time. But the way it's set up right now, there's so much can go wrong for teams like that. I mean, just look at the reigning champs from last year in Florida. They make a big mistake pressing when they're leading ahead. They end up losing in the second round. And then Michigan dominated Arizona 91-73, despite an injury to their best player, Yaxel Lendeborg, which made pretty much everyone think, okay, Michigan's just gonna run away with that championship. Which respect to UConn, they did not run away with it. In the championship, Michigan did defeat UConn to win its first national championship since 1989 with a score of 69-63. Michigan did this despite only making 2 threes the entire game. Now, they kind of commented something about that when you're watching on TV, the left side Michigan had in the first half, UConn had in the second half. making threes on that hoop was not easy. Michigan didn't make a single one. UConn took a little while to make one. They actually made a few. That's the main reason UConn was really close. They could make some threes, but they did. They made some early, but their percentage went way down as the game went on. And foul trouble is what killed UConn. They had multiple players like Reed, who was in foul trouble early, had to spend a lot of time on the bench, which in the championship games against talented teams, even with a hobbled Yaxel Lendeborg, who was still feeling the knee injury, and I believe there may have been an ankle injury in there also. But he was hobbled. He clearly, when he tried to go full speed, you could tell like it wasn't the same. He wasn't himself like he'd been all year, all tournament. But, Elliot Cadeau stepped up. He led the team when Lindeborg couldn't. And Mara did a great job down low against UConn. Because he's just so tall, but he's also he's just a pure basketball player who just happens to be insanely lengthy. So it's not the same, but kind of similar to a Wemby. Not obviously Wemby is significantly better, in the MVP conversation right now. Could possibly win a championship this year, but it's similar. It's a tall, lengthy, skinny guy who can play basketball as not really a shooter, but you kind of get what I mean. I hope so. I hope at least. Otherwise, I'm just not making sense. But yeah, whenever someone was anywhere near him, even when he didn't block the shot, they had to shoot just so high of arc over that it made it an unnatural shot, making them miss pretty often. It happened several times during the game. And Michigan's title run, kind of similar to UConn's a few years ago, maybe not quite as dominant, but just, littered with major wins. Obviously, the first couple rounds it's expected, but then once they start playing those bigger power conference teams, you don't expect it to happen. I mean, they beat a team in Arizona who was the number 1 seed for months this year. A team who went through the Big 12, who had walked their way through the tournament to that point. And Michigan just handled them, just manhandled Arizona. But yeah. Michigan, in their title run, they beat Howard in the first round by 21, expected. Then they beat St. Louis by 23 in the second round. Anticipated a little bit. 13-point win over Bama, not too much, still a good, solid win. But then 33 over Tennessee in the Elite Eight is insane. That is a crazy margin of victory. And then 18 over Arizona. I just mentioned a team that was really good, a team that had been a top team. They were the team that went the longest undefeated this season. That's a tremendous victory to beat that much. And then 6, a good, solid game over UConn in the championship to finalize it for Michigan. And then, to wrap up, I'm going to give out a couple of my personal awards for the 2026 NCAA men's tournament. MVP. A little bit controversial, but obviously it has to go to someone on the winning team. And I'm going to give it to Elliot Cadeau, mostly for just how he stepped up in the championship game against UConn with Lindeborg hobbled. He only averaged 12.33 points per game, but 7.5 assists per game. So he doesn't score as much as, say, Lindeborg or even Amara in the tournament. But assists 7.5 per game is really important because that means he's responsible for not only his points, but those points as well, at least to an extent. So let's just say they're all 2s. Let's just say that's not a single 3. Let's just round it up to 8. That's another 16 points. That's that's 28 points a game he's responsible for at bare minimum in this tournament, which is major for having these large victories. Most impressive team, there are a couple to choose from, but I went with number 11 Texas, maybe partially because I don't want to give Iowa too much credit. But Texas was an 11 seed. They made it to the Sweet 16. They were a first four team, so they barely made it into the tournament to begin with. And they were this close to making it to the Elite Eight. They were a tip-in away from going to overtime with Purdue, where who knows what happens. Maybe Purdue pulls it out. Maybe Texas is able to make a big shock, make a big surprise happen in the tournament. But that's what. Most impressive team, Texas. Disappointment. Number 1 seed, Florida. The reigning champions getting eliminated in the second round by Iowa. Yeah. 5 years bad luck for losing to Iowa. Best shot, I gave it to Braylon Mullins to defeat Duke. Logo 3 to send the number 1 team in the country packing. And after a tremendous comeback and the turnover right before, which brings me to biggest blunder. Caden Boozer's late game turnover, losing turnover against UConn to end Duke's season, and which could have been all avoided if he just held the damn ball. And then my maddest moment, there were a couple to choose from. You could have gone with the Vanderbilt-Nebraska ending. I went with the Kentucky-Santa Clara ending, the back and forth of it, the 2 to tie, the 3 to take the lead, the 3 to tie, send it to overtime, and then the overtime itself. So those are my thoughts on the 2026 Men's NCAA National Tournament. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts on the tournament. Comment, if you liked games, what your favorite moments were, your disappointment in your team. Looking at you, Wisconsin fans. But yeah, just interact. Share this if you liked it and you think someone else will. Please share it on social media. I would appreciate it. Thank you for listening.